Speaker of the House, Kurt Zellers, joins me to talk about the new role the GOP will play come next session. Mr. Speaker, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Good morning.
Let's begin with, as you stated in the news conference just a little bit earlier, the GOP message of balancing the budget without raising taxes. It apparently didn't resonate enough with voters. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think, when times are bad and people are afraid, you're focused on it. You look at what's going to happen, what could happen, how bad could it get. We made things better. I mean, we're almost victims of our own success. We took that deficit into a surplus without raising taxes, whether it's income or sales or, commercial industrial property tax. So I think it was maybe that we made things too good too fast.
Let's talk a bit about the constitutional amendments, because you also stated that you didn't think social issues like those amendments were the only factors in this decision, but there were others as well. But how much of a factor do you think they could have played in how Minnesotans voted?
Sure, and I do think they were a factor, but it isn't a single factor, because you look at other states that were expected to go Republican or were leaning Republican that went for President Obama. It's North Carolina, Florida, still too close to call. So I don't think it was I think it was a factor, absolutely. I think there were maybe groups of people that were coming out and maybe didn't expect, once they got there, which candidate they'd vote for. But I don't think in any election you can say this was the one thing that was the determining factor.
Hindsight being 2020, of course, do you think tackling a social issue like the ban on same-sex marriage in that first legislative session, as the GOP had the majority in the House and Senate, do you think that could have been?
Well, we weren't doing it for a political strategy. It was what our members and a majority of the members, and there were some Democrats that voted for it as well, thought was important. I still think voter integrity is important. The governor and secretary of state said to send it back and that they would work on it the next legislative session. So I'm going to take them at their word, at least from their commercials at least, that they were going to work on that again. And I think that's critically important.
I guess what I was getting at, it was a social issue in a budget year. Do you think that could have been
I don't know. It's probably, for others to maybe pontificate. It's maybe a little too soon for me.
Okay, well, moving ahead, you and Majority Leader Dean stated that your caucus will indeed try to work with the DFL to offer solutions, especially on balancing the budget. Yep. Are there areas for compromise within your caucus and the DFL?
Well, I hope so, but where we are now with a Democrat governor and Democrat legislature, there's not a real onus on them to consult with us. So it'll be up to them and them alone to decide, we're going to ask their ideas on government reform, some redesign, some education reform, especially. We had a number of those initiatives that focus a lot on making sure that the student has the best teacher in the classroom, maybe not the fight between the adults, the school board, and the teachers union. And
there's some history of some bipartisan work on easing regulations. Is that an issue you could see yourselves moving forward with as well?
I think so, and it's especially critical. And you look at our bordering states in Wisconsin, say for instance, you talk to business owners that'll say it takes me a month over there, it takes me 6 months, 9 months in Minnesota. I can't wait that long. And more importantly, my employees that are waiting to go to work can't wait that long. So I think it's incumbent, no matter the party or the governor, to work on those things, because it is about making Minnesota competitive and then being able to compete with bordering states, but also across the country.
Now, the plan that will be likely introduced from the DFL will probably incorporate some new revenue. Of course, this depends how the November forecast, the budget forecast, comes out, but likely an income tax increase for the higher income earners. Is there any support at all in your caucus for this, particularly now? Have you softened at all given the results of the election?
Well, I don't think you can, because it sounds good to say I'm going to tax, the old saying is don't tax you, don't tax me, tax the man behind the tree. Well, the man or the woman that is in those quote-unquote high-income earners are small business women and men, and they're the ones that are going to have to make a decision then about keeping their business in Minnesota or moving to the Dakotas, Iowa, where the tax rates are more favorable. And it's not necessarily for just their bottom line, but it's also to keep their employees working for them. Uline's a company that just left Eagan to go over to Hudson just not too long ago, and they have the CEO has a very long and descriptive answer as to why they left. And I think it's pretty instructive if you want to be a high tax, high regulated, and big government state, that these are some of the things that you can expect. And I don't think that's the right direction, but the voters didn't agree with us this time. They agreed with the other side, and we shall see what comes. And unfortunately for the voters, there'll be another election in 2 years, and they can make that correction then, or they can continue the course.
Let's talk a little bit of using kind of the Monday morning quarterback philosophy here, and your reaction when you saw the results coming in on election night.
You know, very disappointing. Not necessarily for us in the majority or for that, but just for the candidates. You know, when you go out and you door knock and you see how many hours they're spending out in really, really hot days in the 90s, and then all of a sudden this last couple of weeks it was cold, it was rainy. You know, they've worked so hard and they've given up so much to run. I felt most badly for them that they had worked so hard and weren't able to win. So, in that sense, that was probably the most disappointing thing for me. When it's all said and done, we'll see how much was spent on what race and where the dollars went. But at the end of the day, we're a very high turnout state when it comes to presidential elections. We didn't have a +8 for President Obama. Ours was a lot lower. So unfortunately, the numbers didn't work out for us.
And you personally have stated you're not going to seek a leadership position. So what role do you want to take in the next session?
I've always said I won't stay in leadership forever. I want to make sure we build a good bench. That was our goal with a big freshman class of 33, is to develop those future leaders for not only the House Republicans, but for our Republican Party as a whole. So I'll do whatever is asked by our majority or minority leader. If it's a role as a lead on a committee, or if it's as fundraiser, whatever role. I've been a party person since I got into this business, and I'll continue to be.
And we talked a lot about the potential impacts that the amendments had on the election, but nobody's really talked about the Vikings Stadium. And given that, on the Senate side anyway, Senator Julie Rosen, who authored the legislation, won by a considerable margin. Do you think that there might have been some backlash from Minnesotans as well to those who didn't support the stadium?
Yeah, very well could be. There was any polling data that was done publicly showed that 60% of the people said that we don't want to use public dollars for a stadium. So, and those folks traditionally tend to be Republican voters. I think it'll depend afterwards. We look at all the exit polling to see where people voted in precincts based on 2 years ago and 4 years ago to maybe get a good analysis. But it's always possible. And like I said, there's a majority of Minnesotans that don't want to use their tax dollars for a stadium. I was on that side, but obviously did not prevail.
Mr. Speaker, my last question for you is, in your opinion, is this the time for the Republican Party to regroup, or do you think that the message that you've had and continue to carry and the priorities that you have can resonate again in 2 years?
I think so. I really do. Most Minnesotans, most Americans believe in the old-fashioned work ethic, where you work hard, you build a business, or you do really well at your job, you can get a promotion, you can have a better life for you and for your kids. I do this because my family are all small business owners. My family believed in that. That's what was taught to me, and that you go out and you work really hard for those small business owners. You fight for them because they don't have a bunch of lawyers and accountants down here and lobbyists working for them. Most of them are out there in the field every day. I think that message of fiscal responsibility, making sure that every kid, whether it's a math genius or a sales guy like my little 6-year-old will probably be, that they have the best opportunity to be successful in Minnesota. I think that's a message that still carries the day, and I'll be happy to carry it again someday soon.
Speaker of the House, Kurt Zellers, as always, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.